Okay, there's probably an easier way of doing this than this, but this is where we're going. Okay, hi. How are you? So I did a version of the speech about a year ago, but somebody said tonight, sometimes you have to hear things twice, and I think some of the messages here I'd like to talk about again because I think they're important to us. So let me ask you, how many of you are working on a product or working on a service that you think women are the primary target? Okay. How many of you think women are going to be just as much of a target as men? Okay. So therein, I think, is a really important point because today I want to talk to you about embracing the female consumer and not apologizing for it, okay? Because it's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big market. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey, and you heard the bio. What's not in the bio are a couple of things, and perhaps I'll be able to talk about them a little bit more. But I started out in consumer marketing out of business school. I worked at the Clorox company. I worked on Hidden Valley Ranch and Kingsford Charcoal and Formula 409. So I'm sure you all know those brands. And obviously at Clorox, I really focused on, for the most part, except for charcoal, on the female marketplace. And from there, I went over to AAA for just about a year. This was in 1994. And at that time, I had two small children, AAA, the auto club. And they had never had a marketing department, so that was kind of fun. And let me just ask, how many people of you have a AAA card? Yeah, you know, membership like that is pretty powerful. So I went to Match in late 1994 because one of my classmates from business school was starting a company called Electric Classifieds. And the idea was to bring the classifieds through newspapers online. And Match.com was only supposed to be a proof of concept, just to show how classifieds on the internet could work. Well, it obviously took off, and I can talk a little bit about that. How many of you know somebody or have dated online? Yeah, okay. So unfortunately, if you go back 20 years ago, the board members of Electric Classified and the CEOs, and I went through 5 of them, all believed that the newspaper marketplace was much more important, that they didn't recognize that we had a winner in Match.com, and we sold it for less than $10 million to send it in 1998. And I got a nice bonus. I bought some furniture for my house. But, you know, not one of those things that was difficult to stomach afterwards. And part of it is we were so early. The marketplace didn't understand brand or community on the internet or social networking. I mean, you know. So that's probably a whole nother speech to talk about that. But I got over it. And I then went over to women.com, which was an early women's-oriented community and website, probably more content than community, because I don't think we were that good at community. Then I went over to Blue Light, which was a Kmart thing. And then I went over to TRUSTe. Do any of you know TRUSTe? It's a privacy mark. Probably you've seen it all over green and black. So, and what was interesting there is I kind of had a do-over. I was able to take TRUSTe from nonprofit to for-profit. I raised some money, and this time I got what I wanted. And if I had the security and the confidence back when I was doing Match.com, I probably could have done it, but I didn't. And so now we are sitting here in 2014. I think women on the internet as entrepreneurs, as founders, is a really, really important and big subject. Women leaning in, all of this is I think, getting a lot of resonance, and it should. And I'm one of these people who is trying to tell you, don't make the same mistakes, go for it, have some confidence, address the marketplace. But one of the places I'd like to start is with helping you, my slides are all mixed up here. Tonight, I want to talk about the female market and a few lessons, getting the female market, getting her, going mobile, going global, and talk about some of the big disconnects that I see in the marketplace, okay? So as I said, believe it or not, 20 years ago, women were 10% of the internet. Okay? And we were starting a online dating site with those stats. And while we did have a gay community, that stat we thought would change pretty radically and pretty quickly, and it of course did. And so we launched Match.com in 1995, and that's what it looked like. Actually, I guess that's 1993, but I can't find, you know, if there's anything that's good now, you can almost save everything, but I don't have a lot of my files. I mean, they're just gone. It makes me sad.
How about the TRUSTe? Was it there then?
TRUSTe came around in 97. So this TRUSTe is there, and this is 93 to 2000. I don't know exactly. I had to pull this off somewhere. Okay. And Match.com's strategy was to go after the women. And if we got the women, we figured the men would follow. It was a differentiating strategy from all the other online personals. We took kind of the high road of a clean, well-lit place. Because, you know, personals, those of you who are a little bit older probably remember, pretty scuzzy. They were in the newspapers, 900 numbers, and there'd be listings like, you know, want a gangbang, you know, and that would generate people calling the number, and that's how the newspapers made revenue. So we did not want to be that. We want to be a little bit more like a video dating, which was popular then. Mm-hmm. What we didn't know is we were changing everything. So a few of the things that we did differently that I think I'd like to take credit for, and you know what? Isn't that great? I could say to a group of women, I'm going to take credit for these things. And that's another thing I think you all need to do, is take credit for the things you do. And there's two that are my favorite stories. One you'll get immediately. How many of you have ever seen the question, what is your weight, on an online dating site? You never have, yeah. Right? Right. Yeah, well that's because when the engineers came into my office and said, what weight ranges are we going to have? I said, no, we're not going to do that. Because if we're really trying to attract women, we're going to focus on what they are going to feel comfortable with. So we want the body type. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Humanity thanks you.
Thank you. and you know, we all struggle with our self-image, but who needs to know how many pounds you might be carrying? You know, are you athletic? Are you, whatever. The second thing that is actually, I think, under fire right now, and it's interesting how worlds converge, is the business model for most online dating sites is about paying to connect with other people via the internal email system of the community of the dating site. And that came around, and I'll remember the meeting because I called it the Who's is Bigger meeting. So all the guys were in the room, one of the VCs, one of the investors, the technology guys, the business development guys, the founder. And I called it the Who's is Bigger meeting because it sort of sounded like every time we had to make a decision, the guy would start out saying, well, I did this, and I did this, and the other guy would say, well, I did this. And it's like, enough already, can we just get to the, And the idea they had was a dime per email. And I had just come off working at AAA membership. And so I got a real good education in membership, and membership is powerful. We've all heard that. But also, again, if we're trying to attract women, who wants to be nickeled and dimed, right? Not to mention, actually, doing micropayments was going to be very difficult from a technology standpoint, especially back then. So that's why we came up with that business model. I think it was differentiating. Recurring revenue streams for you entrepreneurs, always a good thing, where you can renew people and so on. So that turned out to be, I think, one of the more important innovations. And the reason why it's under attack, I think, is because we have less and less privacy. If I put my picture on an online dating site, and I have, and I would say 3/5 of the dates before I went and met the guy, he knew who I was. because especially now with face recognition and some other things, that presumption of anonymity is really gone away. And so that's more of a sidebar. But again, you would not look at Match.com as being a women's-oriented business, but I would postulate that if a woman wasn't involved, they probably would have gotten to some of the same decisions, but maybe not as quickly, and maybe they wouldn't be where they are right now. So that's the Match.com story. I could go tell these stories for hours. It was fun. Speaking of the social internet, women dominate. Not too surprising to think that Pinterest is at the top of that list. I'm not sure why Google's at the bottom, but you know, does any of this surprise you? Of course, Twitter got in some and Facebook both got in some negative press prior to their IPOs because neither of them had a woman on their board, despite the markets that they serve. Women are shoppers and buyers. Does this surprise any of you? Right? So, about parity and usage, women buy more, women do more transactions, women spend more dollars. So again, if you're going after the women's market, don't apologize. Here's some of the categories that women spend more than men, and yes, I put the women in pink, but it's easy to see. There's only a few areas like flowers, greetings, and gifts that men do a little bit more than women. Now I guess that's good. I think we're okay with that. Right?
That's the Valentine's Day stats, right?
Those were the Valentine's Day stats. Yeah, that's true. Boy, every time you look, you see that more women are more wealthy, spend more, make more of the decisions. A woman from the Stanford class behind me, I think she's the class of 1990, Mary Barra, is now CEO of GM. And car makers are finally starting to get it. Yet I saw an ad the other day. I was like, are you kidding me? Like the little boy was in his high chair and the mom was trying to feed him and making sounds, and the dad came in and made car sounds. And the kid eats the food because the dad's making the car sounds. So I'm like, what? You know, just tone deaf, right? One of the interesting things about this, though, and I'll get to a little bit later, women do have a lot of wealth in this country. They generally do not invest it into startups or risky ventures. In fact, they're much more conservative with their overall investing strategy, and which means they're less risk, so they're less likely to invest in you. They're less likely to be angel investors, and actually they're less likely to get high returns, therefore, overall in their portfolios. And they seem to be much more comfortable about philanthropy. Obviously, giving to philanthropy is something we should all do, but I'm probably going to put more of my money on risky founders than good causes, and hopefully build companies that employ a lot of people and so on.
Yeah, let's get the men work for us.
Yeah, exactly, right? And then here's more on the purchasing power, just as sort of absolute dollars. So cars, healthcare, bank accounts, new homes, vacations, food, you name it. Now, don't get me wrong, I like guys fine. Just so you need to get her though, okay? And I have a bunch of things to say about this. And what I mean by get her is understand who she is, where she's coming from, where she's going. So she's obviously doing a lot of social networking, doing a lot of retail, but that social networking number is so much more indexed towards women that I think speaks to the importance of creating a relationship with your target customer that might be based on a social networking. Understand that she's generally time constrained and trying to get things done in a most efficient kind of way. So to the extent that you can help her do things better, smarter, faster, and maybe with a little bit of fun, do that. Does that ring true to all of you? Respect your differences. Understand that we're not all monolithic in terms of our age, our lifestyle, where we are in our parenting. So a woman who's 40 who has a 3-year-old versus a woman who's 40 with a 20-year-old, looking at life very differently, right? Marital status, attitudes, and so much more. So, you know, one of the fun things that we did at women.com, and there was a lot going on. This is about 1998. And you still see it on TV. When somebody's trying to advertise to women, you get a bunch of women's faces, and there's a Chinese woman, and a black woman, and a Hispanic woman. You know, you get all the faces, maybe you get some different ages. And sometimes that's very heartwarming and good, but to some extent, it sort of misses the point, right? And we did this campaign. I should really show it. And we had the voice of Sarah Jessica Parker before Sex and the City had taken off. But, you know, she was still a recognizable voice. And we had this retro music, and we just had little typewritten phrases that came on. And one was, "Someday your prince will come." And then we knocked down Prince, like erased it. "Someday your babysitter will come." Okay? Another phrase was, "Diamonds are a girl's best friend." Took out diamonds. I want to put stock options, but then we ended up with 401ks. Which was probably the better choice, I admit. So, in other words, what we're trying to do with that is really connect with what she cares about, what's important to her, and show that we understood those kinds of everyday things like personal finance and the importance of a babysitter, and so on. And it doesn't necessarily have to be pink, you know, which is what a lot of people do to say that they're going after the women's market. It is kind of handy to have a color or whatever, so I'm not, obviously I'm using it. But my point is really try to understand her. Don't apply too many labels. Really get to know who your customer is and what can you uniquely deliver to her. Even if your customer is men and women, you know, at Match we had profiles of, here's the guy we're looking for, here's the woman we're looking for. You know, we really thought through who might be looking for a online dating site and tried to kind of get some insight into who they are and what they're looking for. This stuff you guys know. She's going mobile. I thought that was a great picture though, huh? That was at the inauguration. Right now she lags a little bit behind men. This might be changed by now. These numbers are changing so quickly, and I'm hearing more and more that businesses can start directly on mobile, don't necessarily even need a web interface. So I think that's interesting. Games too, especially social games. I can't tell you how many hours I spend on Words with Friends. It's just disgusting. And on mobile shopping, and this is 2012, but you know, basically the only place she indexes higher than the men is using a mobile coupon. And I just think that reinforces the fact that women are almost always looking for a better deal. And she's global. I took that picture. Isn't that amazing? I was in Chennai, India, and if you haven't ever been to India, it will astound you. And I'm in this horrible traffic, and look at these women. It's just great, right? But did you know that most places don't quite have parity with women's use on the internet? So, you know, there's a big market to be had of new people coming on, and just something to keep in mind. And then, of course, remember that she is you and your friends, your family. Now, how many of you took a look at this book, The End of Men and the Rise of Women? Okay, well, you know, it lagged behind Lean In, and Lean In is a very good book. This is a good book because she points out that, oh shoot, I think I lost one of my slides. 60% of college graduates are women. More of the middle management jobs now, because 60% of college graduates are women, are going to women. that there's whole swaths of industries. And unfortunately, especially in some parts of the country, she makes the point, I'm not sure I entirely agree, but I think she makes a good point, that women, when faced with the need to feed their families, after a disruptive thing like the big recession we've had, are willing to almost do anything. But men are more reluctant to go into things like nursing, where there's a chronic shortage, because it has been labeled, and this is just an example, a female field. Although male nurses, I think, are more than welcome and probably needed. So she points out that women have shown, in the face of a downturn, more agility and therefore have done better in this downturn than men, especially older men. And if you're a mother of sons, this book is sobering because obviously you want your son to do as well as he can, as well as your daughters. And well, we are not in the C-suite or the boardrooms or angel investors or VCs. Women are doing really well, and that, again, that explains another reason why the buying power is getting so skewed. So, and in terms of you guys, women starting businesses are outpacing men and in employment and so on. That said, there's a big, what I call the big disconnect. And I think we're all trying to understand what this is. And here's some of the stats. First of all, that picture, oh, that was 100 years ago. But guess what? Really hasn't changed much, okay? Women are 8% of venture-backed founders, 3% of tech firm founders, 11% of venture partners, 15% of the angel investors, 16% of Fortune 1000 board members, and in the Fortune 500, there are only 11 women on the board.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy.
How does this make you feel? Kind of pissed, you know? So what's going on here? Well, I think part of it, and honestly, I think Sheryl Sandberg did a great job. Part of it is we have failed to lean in. We have failed to step up. We are reluctant. I think one of the things that resonated most for me is women wait until they're 110% qualified for a position before they go for it, where guys wait till they're 65% qualified. I mean, that alone explains a whole heck of a lot. I counsel so many startups and women in business and so on. I can't tell you how often we start our presentation deprecating ourselves. I'll give you an example. I'm on the board of this one company. We have a kick-ass female head of sales. Head of sales in any startup, really important position. She missed her number by about 5%. The board already knew it. But a lot of other good things happened in that quarter in terms of building sales team and sales momentum. She started her presentation apologizing for missing the number by 5%. The guy who the other guy who had a revenue line, he missed his number by 25%. But he didn't say a thing about apologizing for it. So why would you do that, right? We do this all the time. And I don't know why. And so, you know, that kind of behavior, we've got to stop and we've got to call each other on it. When you see a friend doing that, you have to say, girlfriend, don't do that. You know, and I think Lean In has given us a vocabulary. I have spent time over the last year with some of my best friends. We're all in our 50s, essentially, early 50s, late 40s. And we have what I now call Lean In confessions, where we talk about the time in our career that we didn't go for it. And these are sad stories. I mean, you sit there, and I will tell you, they're sad stories among a group of fairly successful women. But, you know, the woman who turned down the job running a new breast cancer program at Sloan Kettering because she thought she'd get pregnant. She didn't have the baby for 5 more years. The friend who didn't even ask her husband whether or not she should take a publishing job because it would have meant moving to the back east, she didn't even discuss it with her husband and said no for family reasons, and the person who took it turned out to be president of a major media company down the road. Okay? I missed my shot with Match. That was dumb. You know, but I was tired, I was beat up, and I didn't have enough confidence, and I let that go. Fortunately, I did it over some years later. But I'm just telling you, you've got to address this. And some of the things to do about, but this isn't the exhaustive list, I'm sure you could come up with others, is, you know, first of all, you are a woman, you understand the market, use your advantage, go for it. I think there's an opportunity now, there's more and more research that says women-led startups are more successful. I think there's an arbitrage opportunity for investors to invest in women. I think there's an opportunity for you to get more out of your market. You have to help one another. I know this is a big part of Women's Startup Lab, and I know the women do learn from each other very effectively, and I think that's great. Together we do the deal. I think women have been slower to make partnerships, strategic partnerships with each other, with men, just in general. They just try and do it on their own too much, and you've got to do the deal, okay? Now, I have a very good friend. We decided that we were always going to do the deal together. And whatever job we had, we were going to help each other out, and we were going to do the deal. So she interviewed for a job in online dating, and I coached her. You know, she was calling the people, the inventory. I was like, no. She got the job. I'm sure she got the job mostly on her own merits, but she thought I was helpful to her. She gave me a purse. A few years later, I was taking TRUSTe from nonprofit to for-profit, and she did an intro to Teresa Gao over at Excel, who turned out to be my investor. I bought her a really big purse. And a purse is kind of a nice way to thank another woman for helping you, because it doesn't really matter, again, what size you are. And you can scale it. A nice favor is a little purse, a big favor is a big purse, or an expensive, or a labeled purse, whatever. So you know, try to also recognize and thank and show gratitude when people have help, because helping each other actually is a very good virtuous cycle. You do have to find male champions. Roger, thank you for what you've done here, because you know, we always have to, and hopefully find a good male partner too. Invest in yourself. I think women don't do this. How many of you have used a coach? Okay, probably a good thing, huh? I'm involved in a group of women in privacy, and we talk about our careers all the time. And there seems to be a correlation between women who have hired a coach and how well they've done in subsequent, you know, that's investing in yourself. Investing in yourself also means hiring an assistant. How many of you have hired an assistant? Now, I know your businesses are probably very young, but at some point you have to hire an assistant, because doing your own travel is a stupid thing to do. You know, making that call versus making a call to a customer or a partner, you know, you only have so much time in the day, get an assistant. Those are ways of investing in yourself that you have to do. Take the risk. You wouldn't be here if you're not thinking about taking the risk. That's great. Take the risk. But what I have learned about risk is I think it's very much related to confidence. And it's very much related to how you feel about your skill set. So I feel that if you have invested in yourself, if you do understand your market, if you do have people you can ask for help, if you have done the deals, then it's not that difficult to take a big step, because you understand you have something you can rely on, or you have alternatives, or, you know, the world's not going to end. And I think that's the way you have to start thinking about things when you're an entrepreneur, that everything, not just the stock options, but everything is an option. And you start to have that that frame of mind, then you can start to really assess trade-offs and risk much better. I bought a house in San Francisco 2 years ago, and I was just recently divorced. A really expensive house, okay? I mean, not terribly expensive, but more expensive than almost anybody I knew thought I should do. And it's turned out really well. And the reason why I bring that up is that a friend of mine said to me, you know, that you took a tremendous risk, you just like went for it. I thought you were off your rocker. And I was like, you know, I don't think I saw it as that big of a risk, because I knew the neighborhood. I understood that if I didn't move now, it would be difficult for me to do it. If I didn't move then, it would be difficult for me to do it later. Interest rates were low, the market was still low, I still had a W-2. You know, all those things really kind of made a difference. And I was confident that if it didn't work out, I'd figure it out. Well, the house has probably gone up 25%, just like San Francisco has. It's a wonderful place to entertain. And I rent the top 2 bedrooms on Airbnb almost every single, 3 weeks out of the month. You know, it pays the mortgage and more. So it's been kind of fun, right? So it was a big risk, but, you know, and I was able to sell my other house fine. Everything worked out fine. So it's just a personal example of trying to look at something. Some people might see what you're doing as a risk, but actually if you kind of really know what you're doing, it's not really that much of a risk. You've de-risked it. Does that make sense? So, my last point on this was, and I like to say just be hot. Just, in other words, be confident, go for what you want, go for it, ask for it. What can you lose when somebody says no? Not a whole hell of a lot. But you have to go, I tell this to my sons, if you don't ask, you don't get. That simple, right? So what am I doing now? I'm working with a bunch of startups and other organizations. Ruby Ribbon is about shapewear, sort of social. If anybody wants to have a Ruby Ribbon party, let me know. SoloMo stands for Social Local Mobile. It's sort of retail mobile. So going into a store or going into a exhibit hall, the system will recognize who you are, ping you, say you want some offers. Via is a GPS watch for women. I'm not sure she's going to make it. She was one of the finalists last year at Women 2.0. She's trying to raise some money. Man, Cheryl's working it hard, but this whole wearable device market has gone so fast. Really something. I love Beauty Wim. Laurel's not here. She might be joining Women's Startup Lab in one of the cohorts. Mani Pedi, open table for mani pedis. Don't we all need this? Farmster, farm to table. Kangadoo, mobile app to connect parents with other parents for babysitting, carpools, school events, what have you. And I took a nonprofit board seat with Children's Council of San Francisco, which is trying to address the issue of, do you know how much it costs to have childcare in San Francisco? About $45,000 a year. So many women drop out, right? Because they can't find affordable childcare. So Children's Council is trying to match parents and give them subsidies and make sure there's good childcare, which I think is really important because, well, that $45,000 and staying out of the workforce might make sense for a couple of years. It's probably not the best decision for her or her family over time, So that is all related to my thoughts. So that's my talk for tonight. I'm happy to take some questions. Oh, come on.
Seeing you raised Teresa, there was something that she was on Bloomberg months ago. Did you hear it?
I'm not sure I heard it.
Oh, this is so cool. And especially the Kumbaya diversity comment. It's just 30 seconds.
Midas list of the top 100 venture capitalists. Excel partners Teresa Gal-Ranzetta is also known for backing companies with female founders. She says it's just good business. For the first time, I actually see male co-founders and male co-founding teams who are explicitly looking to bring women into the executive team or the founding team. And believe me, this is not some sort of like, I want to be kumbaya diversity. This is like, no, I looked at the data and it turns out that, 2/3 of my users are, my most valuable users are women. We got to get a woman into the boardroom here.
Yeah.
Just everything that you said.
Teresa is no longer with Excel, and Excel San Francisco or Palo Alto has no other female partners.
Wow, where's she gone?
I think she's going to be doing things on her own, so,
Wow.
yeah. She maybe got too famous. Yes.
One of the statistics was that only 8% of the VC's money goes to women. And how do you suggest changing that, making it more available to women?
Right, so this is just like the boardroom problem. This is a multifaceted and interesting problem once you start to peel the layers. How many of you saw that post a week ago or so about, okay, so the traditional answer, there's not enough women in STEM, right? Great. If I had a daughter, she'd be in STEM. Absolutely. Science, technology, engineering, and so on. But that is not the reason, okay? It's a small part of the reason. How many of the CEOs do you know came from STEM anyway? Not that many, okay? So the issue is we do not have enough women entrepreneurs, women in technology, women at the VC firms, and all of that just creates a situation that getting through is really difficult. But I'll be more specific. VCs have to spend time on the boards of the companies that they fund. So my friend who started the shapewear business, how many of the guy VCs really want to sit there in a boardroom discussing shapewear?
I know a few, they would love to go there.
Okay. This isn't like sexy shapewear necessarily. I mean, okay. Yeah, it's okay. But my point is that to some extent they do have to have an intrinsic interest in the market. And sometimes, so if we don't have enough female investors, then it's really going to be a big problem.
I think part of the problem also is that an investor wants to invest in something that they're familiar with, that they identify.
Well, that's the point, right.
Right. So you have all these males and you bring in a female, but it's a different.
So I don't understand some of this. I do think, I'll give you an example. TRUSTe went from nonprofit to for-profit. TRUSTe, when I was managing it as a nonprofit, we had probably 60% women. We had no technology or engineering or product group, very small sales and marketing group. We get money, we turn from nonprofit to for-profit. I do hire a bunch of guys. I'm happy to. They're good engineers, good product guys, and so on. Interesting, a number of things happened. First of all, the guys who came into the company, they were like, wow, it's kind of fun to work in a tech company that has a lot of women in it. They were kind of like, this is nice, this is good change. It's like, okay, fine. Eventually we hired a new CEO. He came from VeriSign, good guy, a little bit younger than, 10 years younger than I, professional woman, is his wife, very, very high achieving wife. He would definitely call himself a feminist. Yet when he hired basically from the pool of people he knew, which is mostly guys, right? And if I'd say, why don't we really make sure we hire a woman for the marketing job, there was a little resistance. Why? Are you sure? And so, and what I'm trying to say is that was probably one of the best circumstances. I mean, I was still there. The woman was already the company was already sort of female tilted. The men seemed to like working with women, and it still seemed to have this sort of, what's that word, going to the mean? Regressing to the mean, or regressing to the men. Not that the men, I'm not putting any of them down. It was just the natural thing was that they kind of went to the networks they knew, and most of those networks were full of men. Now, I think some things have changed. Like I said, there's some other women on the top of the market there. But it's, and then when you look at the board situation, which is another one that's kind of interesting.
You said 11 women in
Fortune 500.
500 companies, is that are in the board? On the boards of 500
Yeah.
companies, only 11 women?
So the boardroom is top of the heap, right? It's been male dominated for a long, long time. There's things like, there's not really things like term limits or age limits. They're kind of cushy, especially the ones who pay. So you don't necessarily want to give up your board seat. Again, CEOs who usually are in charge of picking the boards generally go to the networks they know. By the way, boards are old. They're in the 60s and 70s, right? Which is also a point. They really don't understand a lot of stuff that's going on now, okay? And, well, there are some efforts, either motivate, there's research that shows diversity of any kind, but female diversity is really good. It's almost one of these check the box things. I have one woman, isn't that enough? Okay? And I don't understand it, because what is it that the guys don't want the women in the room? I don't get it.
I actually read a statistic recently that indicated that there's actually that men and women alike have not or have avoided sponsoring someone into a role at any level for fear of tokenism. And the idea that, you know, oh, you're just bringing her on because she's a woman. So they've avoided it. And people statistically have admitted that this is a...
Right, okay, well, we gotta get over those kinds of things. The state of California, the Senate has passed a resolution encouraging companies operating in California to put more women on boards, and they base that partially, not just on the amount of women served in the market, but also that there's some pretty compelling research showing that women on boards makes a big difference. UK, Netherlands, and other places have put in either hard guidelines or real quotas. And while I don't think any of us want to be a token, with something this intractable, because at this rate, even if they put 50% of new board seats to women, we're looking at 2070, and I think I'll be dead by then.
So you talked about the situation where the investor doesn't want to sit on a board of some company making a product they don't understand or really feel connected to. And you would think then if a woman is pitching something that's like core technology, maybe they'd be more interested.
Yeah.
My experience is, you know, a lot of the female entrepreneurs that I'm meeting are in retail and in sectors where there's a huge female market and they know the market really well. And I'm selling core technology. And I'm wondering, like, if I'm out there standing there pitching to male investors about a product that is totally male dominated, you know, are they going to say, does she really understand what she's talking about? Why isn't she selling you retail?
You can't win either way, right?
I feel like I should just start my pitch by saying, I don't sell fashion.
You know, and sometimes maybe you should, you know? But obviously to the extent that you have the credentials and you know your market. I mean, in the end, understanding your market is a really most important thing, and having a unique and differentiating way of approaching it.
You know, I've seen something really interesting with respect to VCs. I'm not quite sure how to deal with it. In the last 10 days, I've sent 2 female CEOs to 2 of the biggest VCs in the Valley, and they're female-centric companies, and both of them sent the plan on and said, come on, it's interesting, we're sending it on to X, who's going to take it further. Female venture partners. The one that was, they didn't take the meeting, I was kind of floored. And I'm getting the sense that these women are actually being harder on these female entrepreneurs. Maybe it's, I can't really.
I don't know if they're being harder, but I mean, I think the wisdom, Teresa will say, every female entrepreneur has to be better and work harder. Okay? Every female investor has to work better, work be better and work harder, okay? Back to the board things, when they throw out what boards need to have and they put qualifications, they're looking for sitting CEOs, blah, 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 and the criteria are so high that there's just, you know, the amount of women who are going to meet that criteria is so low, it's virtually ridiculous for them to say that. So there are biases. You guys know the Heidi Roizen story, but the recent one. And women are as hard on other women as men. This is why you've got to help each other. You've got to extend the same, you know, I've been doing some angel investing, and it's like, oh my God, I'm investing in one more guy startup than a female startup. I'm like, shit, how'd that happen? But you know, one reason is the guys are a bit more aggressive. You know, they are a bit more aggressive about keeping in touch, calling me, telling me what's going on, blah, blah, blah. That kind of works. So yes, lean in, market, brag, push yourself, go where you're uncomfortable.
From my experience, I think the single biggest mistake that women make, especially in technology.
Just one?
The single biggest one that I think it is, they do not network with men.
Yeah, you have to network with men.
I think, yeah, it's an all boys club. Well, you gotta make your way in, whether you're male or a female. Because when it's time for them to hire someone, or it's time for them to do a partnership with someone, they go to people they know. If you're not in their network, they're not gonna reach you. And Silicon Valley is such a tight-knit community. Everybody knows each other. Everybody does business with the people they know. So you need to go out there. Don't sit and wait for someone to invite you to dance. Just go say, hey, how you doing? You want to dance?
Well, the best way to help them is, or to network, is to, well, let me step back. How many of you have heard about or seen the movie Her? Her.
Heard about it.
The movie is about a man who falls in love with his operating system. And the operating system has a voice of Scarlett Johansson. And the operating system says to him, oh, you had a bad day? I'm so sorry. And you're so smart. And that's such a nice thing that you said. You know, the operating system, Scarlett Johansson's voice, in a very sexy voice, is stroking him the whole damn time. Of course he falls in love. I mean, everybody's calling this a great movie. I'm like, this isn't a great movie. This is just about how, you know, if the guy is stroked well enough, you know, he's going to fall in love. And I'm not trying to be rude, but the point is, one way to network and get close to men, because they're human too, is retweet their tweet, follow them, do a favor. Send them a good recruit. I mean, you know, you give, you get. And it works with men and women both. Sorry for being a little, but honestly, that movie is like, what? So I'll leave it at that.
So I need to ask you, how did the family, starting a family, impacted you professionally? I understand you had some challenges, and what lessons?
Oh, I feel generally great about it. I had my first son when I was 28. I had my second one when I was 31. They're pretty much grown now. I didn't mean to get pregnant that early, but I was married and I got pregnant, and it was like, okay, fine. Mm-hmm. And I think it was really hard on our family, because I think we were a little bit before most of our friends at having children. We didn't quite, for example, couldn't afford the nanny that everybody seemed to think that's the way to go. So my kids went to family daycare. You know what? That was a great experience for them. And they still are good friends with, we collectively are good friends with some of the families we were in family daycare with. I think my bigger issue in my marriage is that my ex-husband had a risk profile of 0. Mm-hmm. And when we married, I didn't know I was going to be an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And he never really kind of got comfortable with some of the inevitable ups and downs. and never really believed that things would work out. And look, there were other issues too, and I'm no angel, but I think fundamentally we had a different outlook on life, such that when we told our kids that we were getting divorced, I think my older one sort of had to suppress a duh. I mean, it's your kids know you pretty well. I think though that if I think about the time in Match.com, in 1997, my oldest would have been 7, my other one was about 4, and I was so tired all the time. And I tell entrepreneurs now, there weren't accelerators. We didn't bring in lunch every day. Nobody really cared about my lifestyle balance. I think things are a little bit better on the ground anyway. They look a little bit better. I am sure that had I had a spouse with a different risk profile, I might have done some stupid things too. More stupid things than I did do. So maybe there was a balancing, but Cheryl talks about this in her book. You've got to be careful about who your partner is. I would say in terms of having children, I tell this to my own kids, but I'm biased because I want to be grandma. Don't wait for perfection in terms of where you are financially, where you are living, maybe even with your own spouse, because there's no perfection. And it's really nice now that my kids are older and I can do pretty much whatever I want. So it's nice. It's really nice. It's very fun. And I have a good relationship with them. So, and I think it's hard though. I think mom can be a little intimidating,
You're chairman of the board at TRUSTe. What's your style? How do you make decisions?
It's such a good question. I basically am trying to support the CEO, and I do support the CEO. I think he's a good guy. So I don't try to micromanage that board. It's a very sophisticated board. I think my role as chair is more of a title at this point in time. I don't know. A couple of insights though. I probably know that business better than any of the other board members because I used to run the business, and I still sometimes in a board meeting find it difficult to understand particularly parts of the product or the strategy, which tells me that the other board members certainly know half as much as I do. So my change in perspective about board members, especially for technology companies, is that they only can understand and take in so much information. And that it's probably, I think the trick for an entrepreneur in managing their boards is trying to really focus them, not obfuscate, I'm not trying to suggest obfuscate, but focus them on the high level things and try and get those few things across rather than painting the world, because there's just no way. And that has been an interesting insight sitting at the other side of the table a couple of years away from that.
Fran, when you were running TRUSTe and you had a board, how much time did you spend with individual board members?
A fair bit. Both, certainly with the nonprofit, had a much larger slate of board members, and it was harder, but certainly like sort of the chairs of the different committees in the nonprofit, quite a bit. With the for-profit, yeah, quite a bit, especially at the beginning, because you have to create a relationship. But board management can be one of the more difficult things for anybody, and I have a friend who's running another startup, and I'm an investor, so I kind of get some of the board notes, and I feel that she shares way too much information. And if you could just, I tell her sometimes, think if you were a guy. If you were a guy, you wouldn't send all that information. I still feel that she sends information to justify what she's doing rather than saying, this is what I'm doing. And it's a difference in tone. And so sometimes I tell the companies I work for, what would a guy do? Maybe that's something you could tell yourself. what would a guy do? And then maybe you might take a different tack, or at least think about taking a different tack. You know, it's a little bit more direct, it's kind of, you know, and that's what a guy would do.
I have one more question, sorry, I have all of this question. But have you thought about starting your own company, your own startup?
Yeah, yes and no. I'm thinking about joining one at a fairly high level, which is fine with me. I'm not really a technology person, so I kind of need to go with a team that does have that, and I might very well be doing that soon.
Let us know.
And you know, I'll tell you what's different for me at this point in my life. I'm not looking for a paycheck necessarily. I'm definitely looking for equity. I definitely want a team that I can get along with. And I want whatever I go into to have some good positive impact. Which certainly TRUSTe and Match.com did, and Women.com for that matter did too. Much more motivated by having an impact than, that's my number one thing.
Do you think that that is a trend, that people, investors are looking for things that can make an impact as well as
I don't know
a
that
profit?
investors are, but I think it's much easier to run a team and run a company and keep motivated through the ups and downs if you think, you know, if you think you have an impact. I'll say that though, but I want my friend Laurel doing Beauty Win for the mani-pedi thing. She has her vision, she's a salon owner, she wants to see this happen. That's no less important to her than what I might do for me. So, but I do think when you have a social impact like privacy, or bringing love to the planet, or addressing whatever, global warming, or massive unemployment, or things like that, it does help keep people motivated through the ups and the downs.
As an angel investor, do you see a lot of women approaching you for any of the ideas and experiment? Do you see that more, or do you invest into more of these? I mean, I'm not putting you in a spot, but I'm just trying to see whether more women are approaching women or not.
I think the ones that, and maybe this does go to the difference in STEM, I think the ones led by the men more often do have a technology component that's more solid. And that might be part of the, it's not an imbalance, but that might be part of the reason why, despite my interest in, and look, I am not saying I'm a big angel investor, we're talking very little money and I'm probably stupid to be doing this at all, okay? But, because, you know, you have to almost assume you're going to lose it all, really. And I already have lost some. I think they're a little bit more buttoned up, but not all the time. Although I have to say, I said to two women who I said to them, call me, I'm interested in investing. Okay? That's pretty much, don't you think? Bing, bing. Neither of them called me back.
No.
Okay? So, now, isn't that...
What's your phone number?
Well, I think one of them closed her round and did really well and didn't need it. And the other one maybe just forgot. I don't know. I mean, I was going to put in big money. We're talking like $10,000, but you know.
But I think it's a good example. It's a good example.
Yeah, I hate to use it though, because maybe they have their own reasons.
Yeah, but you see, for us, we are entrepreneurs, but if we want to be more in venture capital, we need to invest more. We need to have more women to look up to and say, hey, you know what, she did it, I can do it. Right?
Well, you know, I went out to lunch with one of the guys I'm investing in, and I've worked with him, and I have a lot of respect for him, and I love what he's doing. It's called Vocal. It's putting voice. So it's sort of SoundCloud for your own voice to tell stories and share. And I think it's great. He's built the technology. I'm really excited. And I told him I was going to put $25,000 in. You know, again, good friend. And he takes me out to lunch and he tells me he wants me to put in 50. And in the end, we went somewhere in the middle. But, you know, I mean, that's how he approached it. He's like, I want your 25. Actually, I want 50. And on top of that, So this is the deal he gave me. I'm going to match it with advisor shares, and you're going to talk about this, you're going to make people, you're going to do this, and you're going to help me market it. And at some point I said to him, at some point you're going to have to give me a job then. It's like, but you know, that is an example of an aggressiveness that I think is compelling, you know? And you have to ask. You have to know how to ask. And it's funny, I'm on Children's Council Board, the one I was talking to you about, and we had a board challenge on one of the newest board members, and a board challenge to raise some money. And really the apparatus to raise money for this organization isn't well developed yet, okay? So it's sort of new into this. And man, I sent 3 letters or emails with some multimedia, and I posted on Facebook, and I beat everybody. But that's because I was willing to go out and ask. And this board has not been, most of the board members were not recruited for fundraising, you know? And nonprofit boards, honestly, that's really what you're supposed to be doing. But most of them, they're just not comfortable asking, you know? I asked Ari, she put in $50. You know, I've come to enough of these things. Roger, next time, you know?
I'm up to 60.
All right.
I just want to point out, I, in previous lifetime, worked as an actress in Hollywood. And in the 80s, it was the same women in film, women directors.
It's still pretty bad though, right?
Well, no, it's much better.
It's much better.
It's much, much better. I feel like we're like 20 years behind them. Right now, nobody pays attention if it's a female or male who directed a movie. But then, my friend who's a director was one of the 8 women who were directors at the time. This was only 30 years ago. So I think that we're going through something, and people
I think so.
are becoming aware, and then in 10, 20 years, nobody's even talking.
I mean, I don't think we're going to see another Facebook or Twitter. Well, I say that, and then we might. But I think there's a little bit of name and shaming going on.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
You know, if you're a board and you don't have any women, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
You're a VC fund, you don't have any women, what's wrong with you? Now, obviously, 1 isn't enough, but it is a start.
And people are talking about
And
it.
people are talking about it, yeah. I have yet to be on a public board, even though I think I may get there. I may get rejected though, because maybe I act a little bit angry or pissed, and nobody wants a pissed off woman on their board. Yeah, it's interesting, but you know, I am thrilled to be here, thrilled to know that there's Women's Startup Lab and Women 2.0 and some of these other ASTIA, Golden Seed, Springboard. I think we've got to work together, and I think the conversation is changing. And for all my complaints, it's been very, very fun, and I'm pretty happy about it all, so it worked out. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming tonight, and I specifically wanted to thank Fran.